How's it going, Doom Patrollers? Welcome back to another review for Doom Patrol Season 2. Now, it's for Episode 2, titled Tyme Patrol. This episode is written by April Fitzsimmons. I hope I didn't butcher that name, as well as Neil Reynolds. And I, of course, guys, it goes without saying, I really enjoyed this episode. And this is kind of really weird for me to experience because I'm reviewing these episodes one after the other. It's weird. This episode tackled several other different factors. Obviously, the pursuit of still saving Chief because he gave up his immortality to Kipling last episode. We had Cyborg, as predicted from my trailer breakdowns, getting a bit of a connection, which I can't wait to see how that gets explored. But this episode being called Tyme Patrol, it's been something I've been looking forward to for a long time, breaking down this whole show and the news leading up to Season 2, because we knew we were getting Dr. Tyme. And yeah, they did a very, very faithful and hilarious adaptation of him. So before I blabber on anymore, go ahead and like the video, guys, if you're enjoying these reviews. Of course, they will be back to the typical weekly review after episode 3, and also subscribe if you're a fan of Doom Patrol and you just want to see more content like this. So the beginning of this episode, I'm really happy they did this because it gave us a lot more emphasis on when Chief first met Dorothy. In my last review, I obviously hadn't seen episode 2 at that point, so I knew that Chief was in the audience, but I was even speculating about how much he knew about Candlemaker, and this episode opened up a lot more clarity of that situation. So here we had Chief explaining that if you want to understand what I've done, then there are things you need to understand about my daughter, which led to that 1927 flashback where he was brought back to London on a trip, because at this period of time, you can't forget that he worked for the Bureau of Normalcy after coming back from meeting his wife, his lady, I guess you would say, the mother of Dorothy. He wanted to keep her secret, so he played a part instead of being the good Bureau of Oddities, it turned into that horrible Bureau of Normalcy. But he carried on, and that's how he came across this circus, because they got a little bit of a tip which referred to this traveling circus that featured a familiar beast to him, of whom he tried to keep secret from the rest of the world. And as for the girl, Chief naturally put one and one together and was thinking, oh god, could this be? So he had to go and see for himself. And then the scene unfolded exactly as we saw it last episode, with the beast getting attacked. However, we get to see that moment where Dorothy made the wish from Candlemaker, but from the audience's perspective. Now, some of you may have thought, I'm guessing, that it was the beast, but even last episode I said that was definitely Candlemaker, and we get to see Candlemaker absolutely decimate everyone and come right up to Chief. Now, this iteration of Candlemaker, I've already said this technically in my trailer breakdown, even though I'd already seen it. He's fantastic. He looks just like how he should. Slight differences, but like in a cool way. Like, you can't just copy and paste things, but they threw their own coat of paint on Candlemaker, and I think he looks amazing. He spared Niles Calder. You could argue that's down to Dorothy. You could argue that's down to the Candlemaker knowing that he was related to Dorothy, and maybe if he had killed Niles Calder, she wouldn't have granted future wishes. But then again, so I'm getting into my own head here, Dorothy didn't necessarily know that Niles at that point was her father. So I don't know why Candlemaker really spared Niles Calder, but either way, he knows to fear the Candlemaker. And this really interested me because I didn't know how much Niles Calder knew about this Candlemaker, how much of a threat he could be, because I wanted to know what he knew back then, so I knew what he knew in present day. And we even got more clarity to that, which I'll visit a little bit later on in this review. Yet again, everyone, I love the chemistry between Abigail Shapiro and Timothy Dalton. They're just so sweet together. I don't mean to get cringy or anything like that, but I just love those two. He showed her the picture that he drew of her mother, the beast, and yeah, the rest was history, I suppose. And then they went to Danny the Alleyway, who was in, I guess it's the street. They weren't really fully formed into the Danny the Street, I guess we knew last season, and that's the origin as to how Dorothy spent 90 years, I believe it was, on Danny the Street as they kept her safe. And that's all because Chief wanted to find a way, as he put it himself, to become a better father, but that for him was finding immortality. So he went on to do horrible things, which was, to create the Doom Patrol. And yeah, that's pretty messed up. And this all turns out that it was Robot Man recording Niles, kind of like interviewing him per se. I suppose he just wanted to get it all on tape, but this was more about Cliff asking why he did what he did to the Doom Patrol, and he goes on to explain even more, gives us even more context as to just everything. It really ties in season 1 and well before season 1 to the point of where it includes Mr. Nobody, because Niles goes on to detail that he searched the globe to outlive Dorothy by just one day so he can make sure sure that she's safe, but everyone is also safe from her. That brought him to Paraguay, where we got that little puppet flashback. It kind of tells the story, if you guys remember, where the chief came in, his little puppet. I'm sure I'm showing something on screen right now. And Eric Morden, aka Mr. Nobody, was about to trade that talisman to the scientist in return for superpowers, which, as I said, basically explains how Mr. Nobody was created and how Niles was involved in that scene. However, even after this, Niles' longevity was still limited, so he began his experiments in search for true immortality, which is where Rita, Larry, Jane, and Cliff came in. Now, personally, I really enjoyed them throwing in this extra context as to why Chief did what he did. It's a bit of like a moral dilemma. Of course, you could measure it up very easily in each person's perspective. For the Doom Patrol, what he did was horrible, but then again, you can understand where Niles was coming from. I'm not condoning it, of course not, but Timothy Dalton portrays such an interesting version of Chief, where he's such a lovable, welcoming kind of older man and someone everyone trusts and has trusted for years. But then there's this side where even he says himself, and I paraphrase it, where it's like, there's nothing I won't do for my daughter if backed into a corner kind of thing. And it's very interesting where we see these different aspects of Chief start to show. Now, I absolutely loved Darling Come Home waking up Jane. That would scare the living crap out of me, to be fair. I'm sure you will agree. I love how the different personalities in her just went absolutely ape. Also, it was a very kind of morbid good morning. It's like, good morning, rise and shine. Our father is dying. So, okay, darling, okay. And they're really throwing in Jane's little subplot here with all of the disaster that's kind of going on in the underground. They keep all of the personalities think it's time for a change. This is how they're going to try and interject Miranda into things, but Jane's like having none of this at the beginning of the episode and wants to suppress all of the personalities once again through dulling them down through that serum, which, you know, kind of like sedates metahuman powers, if you will. Other than that, the scenes after this, I think, were Rita and Dorothy adorably making breakfast. Love Dorothy's little reference to the drunk wizard that was Kipling and why she's worried about her father dying. She obviously trusts her dad and says it's not true, but I think the others know a little bit better, because that led to that whole debriefing, which was very funny within itself, because they're like seriously talking about Niles dying, but Rita is just kind of really freaking out. After he said he was 139 years old, she's just like, we could be days away from daddy diapers. I love April Bowlby because she's definitely one of my favorites, because Rita is so funny because of this pizzazz that she has, being this like actress from a long time ago. You know, this kind of ego she had that she's got over a lot in season 1, but she still maintains this kind of demeanor, which is always hilarious. And this episode, she really does go hands on with the approach to save Niles, and she's definitely one of the examples of the Doom Patrol members who really does want to keep him around despite learning what she did. And, you know, this comes in with her whole superhero training. Everything ties into this episode, despite her being knocked back quite a bit by the end of this episode from Dr. Tyme himself with the comment about her mother. And I understand why certain members of the Doom Patrol like Rita, despite everything he's done. You know, she points out that he is a flawed man, but now he's dying. And no matter what, you kind of have to look at it this way, that they've all been through a lot. They've all been isolated in Doom Manor for years with this man, up until last season where they really started branching out and going out in the world a bit more. Other than that, Rita's only friend, other than the other weirdos in the Doom Patrol, has been this man who has that whole time maintained the image of looking after her. I think it's just hard to just drop that. And even Jane in this episode needs the Chief, not really on a sentimental level, even though she would love to get back there. That's probably not going to happen in her mind right now, but she wants him for other reasons. Cliff is just like, nope, done. And as for, well, Cyborg, he's off doing his own other thing. Dorothy is kind of concerned that he won't be there, and she is right. He's kind of lying to her to protect her. But, you know, she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know how to cook. She's worried that she won't have her father to walk down the aisle. Like, this is what I mean. Like, Dorothy is just this sweet girl who obviously has this ridiculous ability that could be very dangerous. But yeah, I really like her character, and that moment where we had Herschel with the spider, which would scare the crap out of me as well, do that knock knock joke, that was hilarious. Man, there's so much stuff we're going to see, and I can't wait to dive more into the imaginary friends. But also, this reminds me, in that moment as well, the thing that I teased earlier in terms of Niles knowing about Candlemaker, it seems that he really does. Like, she says, oh, I can make a wish, and he's like, no, absolutely not, never, not for me, not for anything. It really does seem that he knows a lot about Candlemaker and what happens if the wishes get fulfilled. I still don't want to go too in detail with that because I don't want to spoil what the wish fulfillment could do, because obviously you get the idea that Candlemaker, who you saw for the first time in this episode, is terrifying. That's why Niles was practically crying when he went right up into his face. But you get the idea that he's someone really to be feared, and he doesn't want Dorothy doing anything for him, even if it helps her out. He's doing it, let me put it this way, for his own selfish motivations, and I think we're going to see that at some point in this season. But moving onwards, the Dr. Tyme stuff, absolutely fantastic. This all started with Chief looking at that little crystal, saying it's like not enough, and he was examining the continuum. There's different ways that they're going to obviously look into him being alive, and Dr. Tyme was stopped number one. Continuum is essentially this rare mineral that can bend time, and if there was enough of it, maybe they could somehow keep Chief alive for a bit longer. And Rita's just like, oh, let's just do that. But, you know, Chief explains it's not exactly this natural occurring element on Earth. And he gives the somewhat known about origin story of Dr. Jonathan Tyme. Now, Dr. Jonathan Tyme discovered a meteorite after going on this kind of like spiritual journey. And then once he laid his hands on the glowing crystals, he went completely mad. Niles even said that he continued his walkabout in every era of history, and then kind of eventually went on to be known as the terrible Dr. Tyme. And Rita obviously was just about adamant about finding him and seeing if they could get any of that continuum to somehow stretch out Niles Calder's life. Once again, bigging up April Bowlby's Rita. I love her. Like, that little mission debriefing was hilarious. Jane is on board. We understand why, because it's kind of like a selfish motivation. Like, you know, the Chief has done a lot for her. Out of anyone, understands her most. So she's betting that he can help with the underground. As for Cliff, he didn't want to help out, but like the only reason he did help out in the end is because he thinks that it's something that the Chief doesn't want them to do, which is kind of true because Dr. Tyme is very dangerous, and he even said that he sent 3 Bureau of Normalcy agents after Dr. Tyme over the years, and none of them returned. Probably because they just carried on plying him throughout space and time, which we saw quite a few dancers do. And I love how all of those dancers seem to be plucked out of different periods of time. I think Dr. Tyme has just literally been recruiting various people, and the reason why those Bureau of Normalcy agents, as I just said, probably didn't return is because they've just been having this ongoing disco. So we found out that Dr. Tyme is located in this temporal sphere orbiting somewhere between space and time. So like if he's not chilling with the dinosaurs one day or in the Victorian period, this is where he will be. It's kind of, as they refer to it, this time capsule that lives outside space and time. And I love the way how they had to get there through saying what they were doing on August 8th, 1980 at midnight, except you had to say it clockwise. And yeah, what Cliff came out with, because he didn't want to admit at first what he was doing on that night. And you just knew when Chief was emphasizing, like, time and time again, do not touch the continuum, you knew that was going to happen. Yeah. And so they were teleported to this time capsule, if we will, and we met the man, Brandon Perez, I'm sorry if I butchered his name, Dr. Tyme himself, and I think I've said enough with how happy I am with the comic book accuracy here. I mean, like, the torso and area is done a bit stylistically differently, but it still maintains the main, especially the helmet. It is perfect, but hey, we kind of found out that it wasn't a helmet. So after doing a bit of the roller skating, which Rita was invited to do, you know, I loved Cliff and Jane in the background just going absolutely mental, saying, you know, grab the helmet. But this turned into a bit of a disaster because Rita uses her powers to knock over Dr. Tyme, which literally breaks the helmet, which was really his head. And it was kind of killing him, but the brain, as Cliff puts it, like this little continuum brain thingy, was now on the loose, shooting out the little time rays, which were putting people in stasis. Oh man, everything was just going wrong. But in the most wonderfully Doom Patrol wicked, wacky way you could ever want it to go wrong. Cliff and Jane did the one thing they weren't supposed to do, which was touching the continuum attached to the brain. And yeah, they both got flashbacks of their past, which opened up even more interesting plots, which are going to be explored in future episodes to come even more. For Jane, for example, we got to see Miranda, like this younger Jane, younger Kay Chalice, if you will, being exercised for her many personalities. Now, later on in the episode, we get clips of it, seeing how people just essentially dealt with mental health in a very barbaric way. It's just dumb as hell. I'm sure you can all understand as to why, because this was before Jane had the metahuman abilities applied to each of her personalities. This was just where all of those personalities split in this human being to protect that little girl. Yet they just thought she had demons that they wanted to exercise. It's just, ugh. But further on in those clips later we got in the episode, Miranda pretends to be okay. This is the moment where she became the new primary even. But I love that moment from Miranda saying, no matter of holy water will ever purify the sins you allowed to go on in your home, which was obviously a reference to her mother being complicit in what her father did to her, which we saw last season, which I don't even need to get into. It was very interesting seeing the beginning of Miranda, and this is very relevant to present day because Jane is freaking out because she knows that they want a change, meaning they want a change in primary, and that is the return of Miranda. But Jane is like, but why should I be worried about her? She threw herself down that well. But as we know from the Doom Patrol trailer, and for all I know, I might find out from watching the next episode, which some of you may have already seen by now, Miranda returns. But all of this was kind of fixed through Rita turning back the dials on Dr. Tyme's head, I guess you would say. That's his head. It's brilliant, but this reversed time to the point where it brought everything back to the way it was. And Dr. Tyme said something which actually kickstarts something for Rita moving forward. This is going to be how Rita visits the relationship with her mother, because Dr. Tyme says that he's seen her life from beginning to death, and that your mother was right about you. No matter or how hard you try, you'll never be anything other than a fraud, which completely freaks Rita out. And I completely understand, because this is very heavily and deeply buried in Rita, something that will knock her for 6 in a confidence kind of way, and she's gonna have to come to address it because it's very psychologically buried in her, and this is all gonna be a part of her owning and even growing more as a character. And we even saw Rita have a go at Dorothy, because she kind of views herself as a failure now, especially after what happened with Dr. Tyme not being a mission that was pulled off as a success. But yet again, my heart melted for Dorothy in this moment, because she just wanted to learn the things that she kind of briefly mentioned earlier, such as bake, and she just wanted to be taught how to do things right. The thing about Dorothy as well is that this girl lived for 90 years on Danita Street alone. Sure, Niles met her. Sure, Danny was there to perk her up every now and again, but she seemed to be isolated into that little room. I'm still unknown if she was allowed to kind of go around Danita Street. Or did Dannison visit her? I have all these kind of questions. But Dorothy is such a compelling character, and one so easily to fall in love with as an audience member, because she's just, as I've already said, a sweet girl, but she's been so devoid of everything that you would expect, like being loved, having a family in life. And now she's finally got a relationship with her father. It's now being taken away from her, which is why things are going to get so spicy this season with things like Candlemaker, how she's even tempted to make a wish to keep him alive, interactions with the whole broader family, such as the Doom Patrol, little scenes with Rita teaching her to bake. I loved how she came round to doing that for Dorothy. So yeah, bigging up Dorothy again, bigging up Abigail Shapiro. I would love to know your thoughts on Dorothy after 2 episodes as well. Let me know down in the comments below. But let's move on to the Cyborg stuff before the Larry stuff. So Cyborg, as predicted, guys, he's been trying to deal with his PTSD. He just went off from Doom Manor, and I believe he is now in Detroit, Michigan. And as predicted from the trailers, it seems that he likes the look of this other attendee to the meetings, Ronnie. That was very evident just from these scenes anyway. But that first little scene where Victor was looking at her and it was kind of montaging close to her face and her skin, I think that was kind of just him checking her out and him clicking with her. Everyone had a little bit of a problem with Cyborg being there because, technically his grid system can record all of that, so he had to power grid down. But more or less condensing this all into one little thing, this is all about Cyborg finding someone. He tried to find love in the previous season, but they just, shallowly judged him for what he looks like. But I really like this new character. They connected a little bit because she was sharing about losing her mother. He's obviously also lost his mother. But, they're both finding each other at a similar point in each other's life, but also they're broken in their own different ways. Like, she's been a veteran, so she's evidently, with the cane as well, got some issues with her body, and obviously Cyborg has had issues with his body. But it's just, I don't know, I like the way these two are already connecting, and we know that she's going to come back to Doom Manor and meet everyone else, but she also seems badass, as Victor said himself. And then leading off of last episode, which, I've only just spoken about to some of you in another video, but we knew that Larry was looking into his son because his son had unfortunately killed himself. And this really, really got to me. Larry Trainor's story elements or aspects from last season got to a lot of people, but they're continuing that feelsy approach because Larry's just got a very, very sad tale to tell, and that's still unfolding to this day because, yeah, we know that his son's died, so he attends his son's funeral, and he watches his other son, Paul, speak about him. This is where Paul eventually approaches Larry and recognizes his father's voice, recognizes he's alive, and says that Gary was right, and he even gets invited to, the wake or the gathering, set after the funeral, which I knew that Larry wouldn't attend. Even when I saw that scene later, I was like, oh, you're not going to go in, are you? And when they said Gary was right, I didn't know what to make of that, but I didn't expect how sad it would be when Larry went into the barn. I just thought, okay, he theorized that his father was alive. But this is the kid that we saw the flashbacks. The guy who's now dead, the kid in the flashbacks who just loved his father, wanted him to be proud of their family. And then we find out when Larry goes in that like barn that he's been searching for him this whole time. There's a whole memorial to him, a part of the plane crash, the jet crash. It's just, man, with the music, the themes in this show are always amazing. The song choices are amazing, but this was piercing my soul. And they always nail it. They always nail it with anyone, but they nailed it with Larry once again. Despite the situation and circumstances that Larry Trainer was put into with the negative spirit, I don't blame him for how hard this is. I don't blame him for also wanting to walk away from that because of all of the issues and self-conscious aspects he must have had about himself and all of that crap that's happened in the many decades that have passed. But how torturous this must have been for him right now. Knowing that maybe he could have gone back, knowing that he could have maybe had a life with them. A lot of this is digging up the past that he had buried, and I don't know, I think we're going to get a lot more with this. But talking about the pain, that's when when that single butterfly landed on his shoulder, I knew exactly where this was going, and this led to that moment where he was trying to catch a ride back to Doom Manor from anybody, and he was engulfed by all of those butterflies. Now, if you didn't know already, it looks like that's going to be Red Jack. Now, Red Jack, I've talked about a lot on the channel, but I'm not going to give too much weight just in case you haven't seen episode 3. My review for episode 3, which features Red Jack, will be uploaded tomorrow, the 26th. But that was more or less the crazy gist of this episode. Once again, what can I label out of this? A fun, weird, wacky storyline with Dr. Tyme, which had the undertones of obviously a serious theme in still keeping Chief alive, which naturally brought many funny moments, but also many distressful moments for like Rita and everyone else. But then we had the Cyborg stuff, which is going to start him on a new journey of things, but also obviously the extremely serious themes that Larry is going through. So like, maybe I understand why people are worried about it, but I think this is just like season 1. But obviously I can't say it's better yet because I haven't seen the season as a whole. But it is, you know, if you wanted like an uphill kind of diagram, like a line graph, it's just maintaining its momentum. If anything, it's got a propulsion from a rocket boost. So honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed Dr. Tyme, Doom Patrol, and knocking out the park. I don't know if we're going to see him again, considering he expelled them from his little party. Maybe we'll see Dr. Tyme again. He wasn't portrayed so villainous. But anyway, everyone, let me know what you thought of this episode. Let me know what your most favorite part was. Like the video if you did enjoy it, guys. I'd really appreciate that support on the channel. It's been crazy trying to film all of these videos just to go up today and kind of tomorrow for episode 3. So aside from that, everyone, follow me on Twitter. I give a bunch of information there, new kind of exclusive drops on Doom Patrol promo photos. So you're going to want to follow me there for stuff like that, but also just general other stuff I'm going to tweet about. I have a Discord server. The community is fantastic. I engage in voice chats with all of you, and I think that is everything. There's other links in the description where you can support me, but thank you so much for watching. It's time to watch episode 3 and talk about episode 3 now, so I'll see all of you Doom Patrollers in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.